Well, as we've been covering here, following Russell Brand's allegations of sexual assault, the comedian and commentator has been facing an onslaught of deplatforming and demonetization from various sites, including YouTube, the BBC, and Paramount Plus.
YouTube said in a statement to The Hill, quote, "We have suspended monetization on Russell Brand's channel for violating our creator responsibility policy. If a creator's off-platform behavior harms our users, employees, or ecosystem, we take action to protect the community." The company added, this decision applies to all channels that may be owned or operated by Russell Brand.
The Gray Zone's Max Blumenthal responded to this move by recalling a time his own outlet faced their version of deplatforming and discussed this situation with Brand himself. Let's watch.
Once again, the relationship between big tech and the government becomes quite curious. It's interesting and exciting when there's an obvious adversarial component, such as in our last story. But when you see this kind of cohesion, this kind of collaboration, like you cite with the Canadian trucker story, and obviously now you've been a personal, should we say victim of it? You've certainly experienced it. It makes you realize that ultimately what we're sliding towards are more and more normalized, centralized, authoritarian models, centralized currency, ability to close down. We're hearing more and more stories about the intervention in people's financial affairs. It's something that's becoming more prevalent, and I'm not surprised that you're a prominent and high-profile organization to be subject to that kind of obvious corruption.
Max Blumenthal joins us now to discuss. Welcome, Max.
Good to see you.
And I believe that clip was from just before the accusations became public. You know, we've been discussing them a lot on the show. And obviously there's, the context of the accusations themselves are one thing. But I think it's impossible and should be, taken seriously. And we've been discussing them very seriously and somewhat critically of the underlying behavior, despite it still being at the level of anonymous accusations. But I am troubled still, by the fact it's stated in the story that this is all coming together now because of who Russell Brand is now, the audience he has now, and the contrarian and adversarial relationship he has to the mainstream. And then also that even if, you accept them as true, the accusations, which I'm not saying we're at the point where we should, but a deplatforming of his content, of his speech, his words, his things he's created over that seems very coordinated and very troubling and illiberal to me. We wanted to give you a chance to weigh in since you have experienced some of this as well as we just saw.
Yeah, I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. I was on Russell Brand's show on September 11th. It was one of his last shows before the Russell Brand affair. And we were discussing the Gray Zone being suspended or having its fundraiser suspended due to external concerns by GoFundMe, and the whole way that crowdfunding companies were operating within the broader framework of the censorship industrial complex, where the state goes behind the scenes into the offices of Silicon Valley companies and tells them who to ban, who to remove. And we've experienced that constantly. So one thing is clear about the Russell Brand affair. Whatever the merits of the allegations are, and its trial by media, that he is being targeted because he has become perhaps the most prolific critic of corporate media, and as well as the war state and the Ukraine proxy war on the planet. Maybe he's second to Tucker Carlson, but he's clearly threatening some very powerful interests. And so he is being targeted in a coordinated fashion in the same way that he articulated somewhat ironically when he interviewed me. And it began through tabloid media in the UK. You could look at any newsstand in London the day the allegations hit. It was on the front page of every paper. The editors from The Guardian to The Sun to The Mirror, they were feasting off this with libidinal satisfaction because they wanted to see him destroyed for what he had said about them. He had turned on Hollywood as well. So you saw all these prominent figures denouncing him, and he hadn't yet to receive due process. And as I expected, he was demonetized by YouTube, which is really the ultimate form of cancellation in our culture, because YouTube, which is owned by Google, is essentially the inner vortex of our digital commons, which are privatized yet controlled from the outside by powerful interests, including the Department of Homeland Security, British intelligence, and so on. So this raises a larger issue. What terms did he violate? And YouTube says that he violated their rules for off-platform behavior, that you have to conduct yourself well off the platform. Well, if none of these allegations are confirmed and they haven't been seen through in a court of law, then who is Google and a bunch of anonymous corporate functionaries to determine if someone is guilty of essentially felonies? They possibly committed defamation, and at the same time, they're hosting the George W. Bush Library on their platform. They're hosting the Obama Foundation, which has 235,000 subscribers. Barack Obama and his administration raped Libya. That is a confirmed fact. They destabilized the most prosperous nation.
Whoever the Democrat nominee is going to be, because Trump. Woogie boogie boogie. So let's play this video here. And I want to share it with all of you.
As I mentioned earlier, we recorded this interview with Cornell West shortly before his campaign announced that Peter Dow would be his new campaign manager, and that has led to a real debate on the left and many concerns being raised by supporters of the campaign. For those who don't know, Peter Dow is a former Democratic Party strategist who, among other things, played a key public role in the 2016 Hillary Clinton campaign, during which he repeatedly made political attacks on Bernie.
Again, I remember 2016. I'm pretty sure all of you remember 2016. And Peter Dow was there. And look, even in the interview, Brianna Joy Gray brought it up. I just want to say this: Brianna Joy Gray is a fantastic interviewer. She's a great host. She does great work, especially triggering people like Cenk Uygur or Dallas Jones. But the fact that, I guess, forgiveness, or I guess mutual respect has happened, I don't think I could do that. Because I remember speaking to Bernie Sanders delegates and volunteers. I remember being inside the Wells Fargo Center. I saw more civility at Trump rallies than I did at the Wells Fargo. You would expect there would be peace and love, like the Democratic propaganda was saying. Oh, there was peace and love and hugging all around when Hillary was named the nominee. No, there wasn't. No, there was not. Because I know what I saw. And I remember the stories. Peter, you want to talk about that?
Sanders. Peter Dow has since publicly broken with the Democratic Party and supported Bernie Sanders in 2020. It's totally understandable that activists and working people who've been repeatedly sold out have raised concerns about this decision by the West campaign. For one, not only is Dow's break with the Democratic establishment relatively recent, just in the last few months, he was the campaign manager of yet another Democratic Party campaign, Marianne Williamson's. I do think this is a mistake by the Cornell West campaign, in particular because this decision has acted to divide West's current base of supporters. The concerns that have been raised have a real basis in reality. It's not clear what Dow's politics are at this point or where he is headed, and it's important to ask the question, as many have, why put someone who was until only a short while ago with the Democratic Party at the very helm of an independent left campaign?
setting up to be another consequential week in Washington, with just a few days to go before a possible government shutdown unless Congress strikes an 11th hour deal to fund it. We'll get to that in a moment, but we begin with New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the expanding auto workers strike. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
This strike now in 20 states. I know you are headed to Missouri later to strike outside a GM facility. The president goes to Michigan Tuesday. He only announced that after Donald Trump said he was going to UAW strike. Do you think injecting this high level of presidential politics complicates getting a settlement?
Well, I think right now we are in such a crisis in our economy, a crisis of inequality, that it is going to take a level of political and popular support, unlike that we've seen in a strike situation like this in recent and modern history, in order for us to get a breakthrough. What we've seen at the big three are CEOs giving themselves as much as a 40% wage and compensation increase, while workers have actually seen a real wage decrease over the last 10 to 15 years. And in order for us to break that norm, I think it's going to take an unprecedented level of involvement to make sure that workers get what they deserve here.
UAW's president, when he was with us last week, said, when I asked him why the union hadn't yet endorsed President Biden, he said that has to be earned. Mm-hmm. That sounds like he's disappointed that party leadership is not doing as much as they could. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it always has to be earned. And President Biden showing up to the picket line on Tuesday is a historic event. We have never seen in modern history a president show up to a picket line like this. And I think it should be earned. It needs to be earned. And I believe that President Biden is working towards that, especially when he lands in Michigan on Tuesday, to earn that.
You know, one of the things that's happening in the auto industry, as you know, is this market shift and transition to electric vehicles. You were quoted back in July saying you look forward to buying a union-made electric vehicle, but you currently have a non-union-made Tesla. UAW already makes some electric vehicles. So why wasn't that? Is it a problem with the quality? Is it a problem with the style? Is the market just not there?
No, our car was purchased during the pandemic when travel.
Is this market shift and transition to electric vehicles? You were quoted back in July saying you look forward to buying a union-made electric vehicle, but you currently have a non-union-made Tesla. UAW already makes some electric vehicles. So why wasn't that? Is it a problem with the quality? Is it a problem with the style? Is the market just not there?
No, our car was purchased during the pandemic when before a vaccine had come out. So travel between New York and Washington, the safest way that we had determined was an EV, but that was prior to some of the new models.
Welcome to a Sunday edition of Straight Out of Politics. I'm your host for today. I'm CJ, otherwise known as Compton J, or J in real life, James, for my family. But Lord, this is pretty pathetic, because both her and Bernie Sanders have signed a deal with the devil, in a sense, with the Democratic Party, to be on the team and advocate for them. But the Democratic Party and their henchmen, the PR arm, and that's corporate media, they have no problem with throwing pie in your face, even though you're coming into an interview to help them propagandize for Joe Biden. They're still going to throw a pie in your face. Like right here with the Tesla thing. So she's proven whether or not, and I think her name is Margaret Brennan, she's proven whether or not Joe Biden is down with the workers. I'm not here to represent them. I'm representing the capitalists, whether or not Joe Biden goes down there to the UAW march or what not. So that's what she is clearly saying. But welcome again. Let's get into what we're going to be talking about today and some of the graphics. Let's see, do I have the other graphic loaded? So shout out to Aaron for whipping up the graphic. Started out with our generic straight out of politics, which is a beautiful graphic. I always love to use that. But here, let's start here. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, Majority Report has put out a video with an interview, or did an interview during a live stream. I don't think they've clipped it, but it's during their live stream, where they're talking with former Bernie Sanders foreign policy advisor, Matt Duss. And so this is one of the few instances where we can hear the NATO left talk about the Ukraine war, and you can hear in Sam's voice and some of the questions the uneasiness he has about talking about it, because he knows what the left believes in this, right? So you can see that. And then another story, we have Aaron Mate and Glenn Greenwald on there, and they went after Bill Kristol, who's on the far right, for his putting out it's an ad, but it's not an ad for a particular candidate. It's an ad for war. I don't know, have we ever seen a specific ad advocating for war? I don't mean advocating for the military. I mean, like, hey, come down and watch, us take care of Saddam Hussein. But that's basically what we're going to watch. So there's that. I'm sorry. We're going to examine how Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Mate pick apart Bill Kristol's ad that is targeting GOP for support for the Ukraine war. And then a couple of other things. The first topic we're going to get in is the one we started with, and that's AOC on Face the Nation. We're going to get into that one first. But some of the other ones, I covered that one. What's another one I'm going to touch on? Oh, right here. Caitlin Johnston put out another fantastic article we'll be covering, and she puts it in audio version. Her husband reads it. I believe it's her husband. So we'll be covering it. It's an audio version, but it is entitled Preparing for the Ukraine War to Last into the 2030s. And that's what they're trying to prepare us for. So if you're thinking, next year, no. Try in the 2030s. Try that. So we'll be talking about that article. And then we'll be discussing some sort of blockbuster sort of polling. We're going to talk about it. The main story of how we talk about Trump is now beating Biden by 10 points. That's tomorrow on Nick and CJ. I'll just be touching upon an aspect on that larger story where liberal media is turning on Joe Biden. So those are the stories for today. Hit that like button. Get us to 275 likes. We can start there. 275 likes is the target. And let's get into this first story with AOC. And I'm going to rewind it. Let's see. Do I have a banner for this story yet? Here we go. All right. So I'm going to rewind it because I do want to break it down from the beginning of the interview. This is pretty terrible. So we've mentioned this before. AOC is now welcome and has accepted her role as establishment shield, even publicly. And going on this show is part of that job to shield for the establishment, whatever blue person is in office. And this is where we're going to start. So let's start here with AOC on Face the Nation. She covers a couple of things, but what we're going to zero in is her support for Joe Biden. Let's where'd I go? Let's listen
to that in a moment, but we begin with New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the expanding auto workers strike. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
This strike now in 20 states. I know you are headed to Missouri later to strike outside a GM facility. The president goes to Michigan Tuesday. He only announced that after Donald Trump said he was going.
Now, there's a theme that's overlapping here. That's not the theme of that's not the story. That's part of another story. And I just want to point out what she's saying here, how how Joe Biden didn't say he's going to go visit the picket lines until Donald Trump did. That wouldn't normally be a part of her propaganda lines if everybody in the ruling class was behind Joe Biden. So clearly everybody in the ruling class is not behind Joe Biden. The Washington Post article by David Ignatius, Joe, you should not run. I think that was a title or something close to that. Open up the floodgates to where now they're openly talking about him, and especially because this new Washington Post poll that came out where Donald Trump is now beating Joe Biden by 10 points. And this is a Washington Post poll. This is not some fringe pollster. This is Washington Post. So you have the CNN poll that came out that shocked the system. You got this Washington Post poll. But the point that Brennan makes here, and that's who I'm speaking to, the host, Brennan is so she's making the point. Joe Biden is obviously only doing this because Donald Trump said he was going to go down there. So now Joe Biden is forced to go down there. So keep that at the context of when we get to the part where AOC is praising him. Keep the context of he is being dragged there. So understand that. So let's play it, or let's continue.
To UAW strike. Do you think injecting this high level of presidential politics complicates getting a settlement?
Well, I think right now we are in such a crisis in our economy, a crisis of inequality, that it is going to take a level of political and popular support, unlike that we've seen in a strike situation like this in recent and modern history, in order for us to get a breakthrough.
Now, I must say I like that answer, regardless of what the question is. Her saying, we actually need to do things that we don't normally typically do. We need to start seeing those things in order to have some sort of breakthrough. That's actually right. So I give her kudos. If I should be doing it or not, I don't know, but I'm going to do it anyway. I give her kudos for at least saying that part, even if later on, she's going to, in a few seconds, she's going to be praising Joe Biden, who's not. And understand, she is a strike breaker. What is the effective value, in the opinion of a strike breaker, about another person's sort of level of being an advocate for labor? Let's listen to more of her answer.
What we've seen at the big three are CEOs giving themselves as much as a 40% wage and compensation increase, while workers have actually seen a real wage decrease over the last 10 to 15 years. And in order for us to break that norm, I think it's going to take an unprecedented level of involvement
to make sure
that workers get what they deserve here.
Like that answer.
UAW's president, when he was with us last week, said, when I asked him why the union hadn't yet endorsed President Biden, he said that has to be earned.
Now, understand the left, corporate media gives, anytime they have a person on the left, and that's AOC, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders, you'll see it more often in Bernie Sanders and AOC, they give these test questions to see if you're in line with your ruling class talking points. Let me see. Okay. Got in line with these ruling class talking points. This is one of those test questions, because she could say, yeah, he does need to do more. Yeah, he hasn't been doing. She could say that. That would prove to them, or say to them, wait a minute, she's still a little too progressive to be representing an establishment. But she does not take that line. Same thing with Bernie Sanders. They never take the bait to actually say what they should be saying as a quote unquote socialist. We all know they're not that. Instead, they remain in the establishment. This is a test question, and I'm going to rewind it so you can hear it.
To take an unprecedented level of involvement to make sure that workers get what they deserve here.
UAW's president, when he was with us last week, said, when I asked him why the union hadn't yet endorsed President Biden, he said that has to be earned. That sounds like he's disappointed that party leadership is not doing as much as they could. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think
that
it
was her
always has to
opportunity.
be earned. And President Biden.
So what does she do? She deflects. Understand, it always has to be earned. You must be thinking, yeah, it does. That's an answer. Not for her to go off on a philosophical point. That's an answer to deflect her criticism from only applying to Joe Biden. We're not asking about anybody else, AOC. She's asking you about Joe Biden. So why are you going to take a question about a specific person and make it broad unless you're here to shield for the person and not lay criticism on him? So you go, it's not just Joe Biden. It's everybody. Everybody, come on now. You get what I'm saying? That's what she's doing here. Don't think she's just being philosophical with it. This is a deflection. This is her she running and catching a beam. You know, Brennan just shooting a beam at Biden, and she's standing in front of Biden catching beams. Let's listen.
And showing up to the picket line on Tuesday is a historic event. We have never seen.
This line is what made me come today on air. This line here. This line, this word, historic, on record is another one, but it's effectively means the same thing. When they say on record, this is the best on record. Historic is so misused because if a president never did it, doesn't it make him just showing up, getting a hot dog at the hot dog stand and then leaving? Isn't that historic? Historic always is based on the starting point, but a good propagandist never tells you the starting point, and that leaves the listener to believing more than what you should. Historic, when you hear a person using these word like historic or specifically historic, that is a person that has a little training in propaganda. That's saying something that's giving an outsized compliment that's not deserved by using the word historic. But if you're looking up definition wise, it's not wrong. If I give you a penny for 50 years and then I give you 2 pennies 1 year, the 2 pennies is historic. By definition, that is true, but we all get the connotation of the word historic. It also gives the appearance that this must be much more than what it was. So let's listen to the rest of her answer. I'm going to rewind so we can get that full answer of historic here.
They deserve here.
UAW's president, when he was with us last week, said, when I asked him why the union hadn't yet endorsed President Biden, he said that has to be earned. That sounds like he's disappointed that party leadership is not doing as much as they could. Do you agree with that?
Well,
Why, yes, I do agree with that. They aren't doing more that they could, like giving contracts to the Strikebreaker, what is it? Union Busters, Amazon. But she can't say that. She's kind of in a pickle, I understand, because they broke strikes. She's part of the team that broke strikes. So what options does she really have to answer this question? Like, literally, what options does she really have?
I think it always has to be earned. And President Biden showing up to the picket line on Tuesday is a historic event. We have never seen in modern history a president show up to a picket line like this. And I think it should be earned. It needs to be earned. And I believe that President Biden.
Progressives are stretching the phrase show up to mean more than it is. in order, and my Perfect Union does this too. If you know more Perfect Union, it's a organization that talks about a lot of labor. But understand that's a Democratic Shield organization. Now we all retweet them sometimes because whether a Democratic Shield organization or not, they tweet good things about labor most times. But if you notice through their body of tweets, their body of work of tweets, you won't find many critiques of the Democratic Party. You'll find a lot of pointing out when Democrats do good things. And they did that recently when using the same language. This is historic. I'm going to bring up the tweet in a second. This is historic what's happening. And of course, RBN had to point out Fareed Shakir, I always pronounce it, but we all know who he is. He started More Perfect Union. Most people don't know that. This is a Democratic Shield organization. That doesn't mean they don't tweet and talk about good things or point out good things about labor. But so both can be true. But let's listen. Oops. I hit something I was not supposed to hit. Hold on a second here, everybody. There we go. There we go.
Is working towards that, especially when he lands in Michigan on Tuesday to earn that.
You know, one of the things that's happening in the auto industry, as you know, is this market shift and transition to electric vehicles. You were quoted back in July saying you look forward to buying a union.
Now, this is just some silliness here because this is where this host, Brennan, is really showing you AOC, I don't give a fuck what y'all doing down here in Michigan helping these fucking workers. Let me make sure you clearly understand. I'm for the capitalist, motherfucker. That's what this question is right here. Because what she's pointing out here is absolutely ludicrous nonsense from the workers' point of view. This is none of our business, what she's about to ask here. So let's listen to the question. Let me back it up just. Oops, that's too much. Right there.
Vehicles. You were quoted back in July saying you look forward to buying a union-made electric vehicle, but you currently have a non-union-made Tesla. UAW already makes some electric vehicles. So
Yes.
why wasn't that? Is it a problem with the quality? Is it a problem with the style? Is the market just not there?
You understand when I said earlier, you see how even though she's agreed to be an establishment shield, they still going to use the left, doesn't matter, as a punching bag. They do this to Bernie Sanders all the time. Because how dare you, if I'm an advocate for AOC, how dare you insert that? Because it literally, you understand, she points out the thing about AOC. That's not part of the question. That's purely to point out you are a hypocrite, mother. That's what she's trying to say. You are a hypocrite, AOC, because you purchased a non-union Tesla electrical vehicle. And they're going to keep coming back to this it's so weak for you to accept this role when knowing that they're going to be doing these things to you. Let's rewind it a little bit and let her begin at the beginning of the question.
Electric vehicle, but you currently have a non-union made Tesla. UAW already makes some electric vehicles. So
Yes.
why wasn't that? Is it a problem with the quality? Is it a problem with the style? Is the market just not there?
No, our car was purchased during the pandemic when before a vaccine had come out.
Word salad.
So travel between New York and Washington, the safest way that we had determined was an EV, but that was prior to some of the new models coming out on the market that had the range available. But we're actually looking into trading in our car now. So we're looking into it. And
you understand that they're not even talking to each other. Do you guys understand that? They're not even talking to each other. That's not the question she asked. AOC, all the things that she just said is not even the question that she asked. None of that is the question that she asked. And Brennan didn't have to insert that about Tesla. She didn't have to insert that. She could have just asked her the question. So they're not even really talking to each other in this segment. But this is embarrassing for ALC. You mean she probably thinking, you mean you got the audacity? Why you motherfucker? I come down here to shield for fucking sleepy Joe Biden. All when we all know we're all strikebreakers here, and you gonna throw me under the bus in my own interview to my own face? You look so weak. Let's I gotta let's to the question. Let me let the entire answer play.
Shift and transition to electric vehicles. You were quoted back in July saying you look forward to buying a union-made electric vehicle, but you currently have a non-union-made Tesla. UAW already makes some electric vehicles. So
Yes.
why wasn't that? Is it a problem with the quality? Is it a problem with the style? Is the market just not there?
No, our car was purchased during the pandemic when before a vaccine had come out. So travel between New York and Washington, the safest way that we had determined was an EV, but that was prior to some of the new models coming out on the market that had the range available. But we're actually looking into trading in our car now. So we're looking into it, and hopefully we will soon.
Elon.
The professional managerial class, they're such terrible representative of the left. They are awful because they straddle the line and cozy up with the capitalist class. So you see this point where she's buying this Tesla that's not union made? That's her professional managerial class side. That's her class. That's her, hey, we all just, doing our thing, regardless of anything that we're projecting to people that we vote that should be voting for us. But then when you have to put on your left hat and go on these stations, and then they question you about your PMC decisions, but you got to answer from a left perspective, you look like a fool, and you make the left look like a fool. You see? Terrible representatives of the left perspective. That was a terrible, flimsy answer. That was pretty terrible. You're right. I'm giving them respect. I'm gonna throw that up there. You're right. I'm just giving them respect for what they say. Like if somebody says, I want to be called this, that's the only reason why we would even be talking about calling them left. Because if they didn't refer to themselves as that, of course we would not. But if they say that, that's the only reason I'm even doing that. It's just to give a person who says, I want to be called this or referred to this, that respect. Let's continue just to critique why the professional managerial class has such a problem. See the straddling of the line right here? Pointing out the union. You're fighting for talking about union should be Tesla, electric vehicles should be unionized and having all of these perks. But then you out there buying Tesla non-union electric vehicles with a flimsy ass fucking excuse.
Musk, who has a majority share in Tesla, has said a lot of things against the unions. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these electric vehicle battery manufacturing plants as well are not unionized. Mm-hmm. So there's tension here.
Yes. Yeah. And
you see, this is where AOC socialist, if she was a socialist, you know what she should be. There's a lot of things you could be using to answer this question. Like, well, ma'am, what you're bringing up, that's an owner class issue that has zero to do with workers and what they should be paid. What the owner's overhead costs, that is none of my business. That's one way. Another way should be the way that Sean answers this question. Why are we, this is a race to the bottom then. Why are we trying to compete with people who are getting less? Why is that the bar? Is that what Americans do? Should we set our bar for democracy at the level of of Ukraine? Is that what should we do, Margaret Brent? You see how there's a lot of different ways she can attack this question here from a socialist perspective. Because the argument that she's trying to present, listen, owners have to think about competing with people who don't have to worry about unions. That's what she's saying. That has nothing to do with workers. And let's listen.
It's something that I have been speaking with President Fain about, because one thing that we're all on the same page about is that we do not want the transition from a fossil fuel economy to an electric economy to represent an erosion in the unionization and rights of workers.
You were quoted in the New York Times in August as saying immigration is arguably this administration's weakest issue. What did you mean?
What?
Well, I think the politics around immigration in the United
That seemed like that's not the actual recording. Like, now the show may have put this out as this is the interview, because I'm watching the show. This is from my my television provider. I'm watching the actual Face the Nation on TV, and I can rewind and go back. That's the only reason I'm able to do this, right? So this is not a clip. That wasn't a natural break there. So she said something and they decided not to air it. Let me see if you see it's not a natural break there. Let's see if everybody sees it, if you notice it.
to represent an erosion in the unionization and rights of workers.
You were quoted in the New
Right
York
there.
Times in August as saying immigration is arguably this administration's weakest issue. What did you mean?
Well, I think the politics around immigration in the United States is, to no surprise to many people, one of the most contentious issues. We saw this dramatically inflamed under President Trump, but it remains to be a very controversial and contentious issue. And that makes, I believe, enacting some of the policy changes necessary much more complicated and difficult. Now, this week, after perhaps almost a year of pushing from both the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to the New York delegation in Congress, we pushed to make sure that the Biden administration extended temporary protective status, otherwise known as TPS, for Venezuelans, which will allow and open the pathway for Venezuelan migrants to actually begin working and supporting themselves, which will reduce the strain on our public systems, particularly New York's shelter system and more.
It's for 500,000 Venezuelans, but only if they came here before July.
Yes.
So does Congress need to do something like the HIRE Act that one of our guests, Tony Gonzalez, has put forward, or others, to put that into law, so it's not just a one-off?
Well, I definitely think that we need to have comprehensive immigration reform so that we aren't constantly doing this patchwork policy extensions. That has not happened for decades. But additionally, I think we also need to examine the root of this problem, because if we are constantly engaging in foreign policy that drives people to our southern border. In this specific instance, U.S. sanctions that were originally authored by Marco Rubio began and precipitated, certainly took a large part in the driving of populations to our southern border. Shortly after those sanctions, those broad-based sanctions.
You're talking about Venezuela.
Yes. Shortly after those broad-based sanctions were enacted, we started seeing dramatic increases in these populations that were coming to our southern border. And so we have to address the root of these population movements and the migration crisis. And we also have to address the domestic U.S. policy issues when it comes to immigration reform.
But the Maduro government has also.
So that's a pretty decent answer from AOC. So I do want to rewind it because it is important, the point that she's making. And when there are issues where the ruling class does allow more leftward movement leeway, if you will, for these progressive actors to go. This is one of them, immigration, because it's a culture war issue that can just go red, blue. But let's listen to the question again and her answer, because this is an important point that she makes. Let me see if I can get a more precise footing here. Yeah, let's go there. All right, so let's listen.
To represent an erosion in the unionization and rights of workers.
You were quoted in the New York Times in August as saying immigration is arguably this administration's weakest issue. What did you mean?
Well, I think the politics around immigration in the United States is, to no surprise,
it's their weakest issue. Deportation's up. Detention centers still doing the same thing, but now they're called something facilities. ICE funding up. I think he just sent some troops to the border. So he's pretty much a Republican. But this is her harshest critique of the Biden administration, is this culture war thing. It's a real issue. Don't get me wrong. They're just using it. They've co-opted it as a culture war, as a red-blue thing.
Many people, one of the most contentious issues. We saw this dramatically inflamed under President Trump, but it remains to be a very controversial and contentious issue. And that makes, I believe, enacting some of the policy changes necessary much more complicated and difficult. Now, this week, after perhaps almost a year of pushing from both the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to the New York delegation in Congress, we pushed to make sure that the Biden administration extended temporary protective status, otherwise known as TPS, for Venezuelans, which will allow and open the pathway for Venezuelan migrants to actually begin working and supporting themselves, which will reduce the strain on our public systems, particularly New York's shelter system and more.
That's right. 500,000 Venezuelans, but only if they came here before July.
Yes.
So does Congress need to do something like the HIRE Act that one of our guests, Tony Gonzalez, has put forward, or others, to put that into law, so it's not just a one-off?
Well, I definitely think that we need to have comprehensive immigration reform so that we aren't constantly doing this patchwork policy extensions. That has not happened for decades. But additionally, I think we also...
So let me just separate. Up until that point, it's like, blah, answer. Here is where she decides to actually give a pretty decent answer. And let's listen.
Need to examine the root of this problem, because if we are constantly engaging in foreign policy that drives people to our southern border, in this specific instance, U.S. sanctions that were originally authored by Marco Rubio began and precipitated.
Now, you notice she could be only being able be willing to bring up this point because you notice she said Marco Rubio, a red guy, did this, so I can bring this up. Blues establishment, don't get mad at me. Maybe she's doing that, or maybe even in the context of red blue game, that this is something that the red team guy brought up. So I think that's the reason she's feel comfortable enough to bring this point up. Let me go back 4 seconds.
U.S. sanctions that were originally authored by Marco Rubio began and precipitated, certainly took a large part in the driving of populations to our southern border. Shortly after those sanctions, those broad-based sanctions.
You're talking about Venezuela.
Yes. Shortly after those broad-based sanctions were enacted, we started seeing dramatic increases in these populations that were coming to our southern border. And so we have to address the root of these population movements.
So the reason I say this is a good response, because there's a lot of people in particular, I'm talking in particular of all the Sunday shows, the CBS network have some of the most elderly, their audience is some of the most elderly and some of the most white. So this is something they may have never ever heard of. What do you mean sanctions pushing these migrants to come to our borders? So even though she doesn't go in depth to explain the connection, it might be enough said that somebody in the audience may go, let me look up what she's talking about, to even get a few more people to understand the reality of the dynamics of why anybody comes to this place, come to the ship that's pulling the plug on everybody else's ship, and then the people in the water are swimming to our boat. You get what I'm saying? So that's what she's trying to do without saying enough to go in detail. But let's listen.
Broad-based
I'm
sanctions.
talking about Venezuela.
Yes, shortly after those broad-based sanctions were enacted, we started seeing dramatic increases in these populations that were coming to our southern border. And so we have to address the root of these population movements and the migration crisis. And we also have to address the domestic U.S. policy issues when it comes to immigration reform.
But the Maduro government has also been responsible for large parts of
Absolutely.
Here we
that. Are
go.
you saying that you want the Biden administration to pull back pressure on him?
I think we need to
So Brennan goes, wait. You know the framing of Maduro, right? So what you're saying, you can't be acting like this is not Maduro's fault. And you notice, even though she said in that small segment, so the kudos I give her is just for a sliver, because she says it, and then she goes back into establishment. Yeah, yo, hold on, yeah, Venezuela, Maduro, yeah, bad, yeah. You see, that's what she does. She throws in a little bit, but this is so classically the professional managerial class left, the Bernie Sanders left. They're so timid. Here's a little bit, I'm sorry for giving you this critique. Like, they're so very timid, and it's the mildest critique, and then they back off. Let's listen. I'm going to back it up, and you'll see she gets kind of shook. Like, oh, am I in trouble?
domestic U.S. policy issues when it comes to immigration reform.
But the Maduro government has also been responsible for large parts of that.
Absolutely.
Are you
You
saying
know,
that
she
you
looks,
want
she's
to-
like,
you want the Biden?
you know the talking point. You see how she look at her eye, like kind of like gives her a wink. Maduro, you know the talking point. You've been into establishment school. And then she goes, of course. And let's let her finish.
Administration to pull back pressure on him?
I think we need to re-examine the nature of these sanctions. There are sanctions.
That is so weak. So she goes, wait. Are you saying we should lift sanctions? Now, a socialist, a leftist, even if you're not a socialist, a leftist who's standing on principles and what she believes would be saying what here? What would Cornell West be saying here? What would Claudia Dela Cruz be saying here? Hell the fuck yes! And off of Cuba, and a bunch of other countries should be lifting all this pressure off. That's what she should be saying. But since she has decided to, move her tassel, she graduated onto being fully a public establishment tool. She understands. Oh, okay. My leeway was that 10 seconds of where I said something accurate about sanctions causing migrants to flow here. That's my leeway, and that's it. Everything else I'm on board with, and that's essentially. I mean, can you argue otherwise?
That are very specific. For example, the Magnitsky Act sanctions.
Like
that
saying,
do
like,
actually
we need to re-examine. These people are so weak.
focus on the decision makers and people who may be violating norms, practices, civil rights, but broad-based sanctions that punish the overall economy and harm everyday working people that are driving them into the economic and political destitution that force millions of people, both not just to the United States, but even to our regional partners.
Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, as you know, has
going
just
on
been
to this one.
indicted on bribery charges. Should he resign? And what do you think of his statement that it has to do with him being a Latino?
Well, I think the situation is quite unfortunate, but I do believe that it is in the best interests for Senator Menendez to resign in this moment. As you mentioned, consistency matters. It shouldn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat.
Wow.
The details in this indictment are extremely serious.
So she's showing her true establishment chops here, because the reason they're asking this question, if you notice, they're asking a lot of different Democratic politicians. This question is not about Bob Menendez. This question is about Donald Trump. That's what this question is. Because this Democrat has charges. They're just charges, allegations. So are we saying he needs to go like you're saying Trump needs to go? Or are we saying he deserves due process? That's why because I think they got a couple of them right when it happened online saying, no, who said due process? I think it was Jim Clyburn. I think Jim Clyburn was saying something he deserved due process. So the point being, if he gets due process, Republicans are going to turn around and say, well, doesn't Donald Trump get due process for all the 91 charges that you guys keep like using the number 91? So this is the line. They're deciding to throw Bob Menendez under the bus. The majority of them, the ones who are sticking to the Trump bad message, they're saying, okay. But you'll notice you're getting different answers. I say it's probably 75-25. 75 are saying, yes, he must resign. 25 are saying no. And it's a mixed bag. But let's listen again. Let me rewind it just 15 seconds to hear that again. Actually, 30 seconds here.
As you know, has just been indicted on bribery charges. Should he resign? And what do you think of his statement that it has to do with him being a Latino?
Well, I think the situation is quite unfortunate, but I do believe that it is in the best interests for Senator Menendez to resign in this moment. As you mentioned, consistency matters. It shouldn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. The details in this indictment are extremely serious. They involve the nature of not just his, but all of our seats in Congress. And while, as a Latina, there are absolutely ways in which there is systemic bias, but I think what is here in this indictment is quite clear. And I believe it is in the best interest to maintain the integrity of the seat. I want to emphasize that all people they must be extended the presumption of innocence until proven guilty.
Some Republican members like Matt Gaetz have threatened to try to oust Speaker McCarthy if he threw a motion to vacate. Would you vote with him as a Democrat to get to 218 to oust Speaker McCarthy?
I mean, I think that we would have to cross that bridge when we get to it. Speaker McCarthy has been very weak. I think that he has also engaged in just absolutely terrible decision making for the American people, from continuing to try to cement denying the right to an abortion among women, to the denial of to policy that denies the reality of climate change, to basic fiscal irresponsibility and recklessness. We are at the brink of a shutdown right now. And so absolutely, I think there is grounds. However, we are also in the midst of an extremely chaotic Republican Party, and we do not want chaos to reign in Washington either.
Congresswoman, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We turn.
That video was so edited. That video was so edited. It was so many unnatural cuts to saying something else. But I'm very curious to know why are they? Did she have something edited out, or did she like have them say, "Hey, could you take this out or take that out," or did they just say, "Hey, you're saying something that's too far left here, so we're just gonna take this out"? So I would be curious to know which that is. I do want to rewind it just a little bit to hear her answer again, and we're gonna compare it, or not necessarily compare it, but examine it in relation to what forced the vote and how the Freedom Caucus has used forced the vote. So let's examine her answer with that in mind now. And I'm going to toss up the numbers here down at the bottom for you guys. Yeah, so let's rewind it just a little bit here and listen to this again about Speaker McCarthy. Let's go all the way back to the question. And then we shall move on to something else here. I think, man, I didn't realize she talked so much about him. Maybe did I go
The
too far?
United States is, to no surprise to many people, one of the most contentious issues. We saw this dramatically inflamed under President Trump, but it
Okay, so yeah, I did it too long. Okay, so hold on a second here.
specific. For example, the Magnitsky Act sanctions.
Yeah. All right, so I'm almost to the spot. My bad, everybody. I did go too far back.
Presumption of innocence until proven guilty.
Some Republican members like Matt
Right here.
Gaetz have threatened to try to oust Speaker McCarthy if he threw a motion to vacate. Would you vote with him as a Democrat to get to 218 to oust Speaker McCarthy?
I mean,
That's a good question. As a progressive, would you oust Speaker McCarthy if a vote came up? How many Democrats would vote to oust Speaker McCarthy? That doesn't mean a Democrat is going to become Speaker. It just means that guy is going to be gone. How many Democrats would actually do that? That's actually a good question. Let's listen.
I think that we would have to cross that bridge when we get to it. Speaker McCarthy has been very weak. I think that he has also engaged in just absolutely terrible decision making for the American people, from continuing to try to cement denying the right to an abortion among women, to the denial of to policy that denies the reality of climate change, to basic fiscal irresponsibility and recklessness. We are at the brink of a shutdown right now. And so absolutely, I think there is grounds. However, we are also in the midst of an extremely chaotic Republican Party. And
it's so rich to hear a person who should have forced a vote and could be getting things from the left perspective in this same militant manner talk about things happening in her opponent's party, the red team's party, when they're doing that same thing. But you hear how she's describing what they're doing: chaotic, doesn't have control of his caucus. They call freedom and the process of freedom chaotic. When you don't fall in line, that's chaotic. And that's the same way she's describing. But somehow she is going to do something for the left against leadership, I guess.
And we do not want chaos to reign in Washington either.
Congresswoman, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, they edit that a lot. That has been edited. So let me bring up Twitter and see what other receipts I have here for this story. I may just have a tweet or two to show you. I'm looking at YouTube. Yeah, I may have a tweet or two to show you. Let me just see here. Face the nation, face the nation, face the nation, face the nation, face the nation. Let's see. AOC, face the nation. I'd have had it in here. Maybe I don't. Or obviously I didn't save it. Sometimes I do that. Let's see if I can find those comments. Those are our tweets here. Maybe I did. Maybe I can't. Okay, I think this. Yeah, this is the. I didn't have this one saved. So let's read what this person says. He posted this also. Bias ABC Politics Face the Nation host Margaret Brennan asks AOC if Bob Menendez should resign, and AOC answered yes, stating that his integrity disqualifies him. I kindly asked Marlon Brennan to invite a Republican House member and discuss the integrity of their party. George Santos and Clarence Thomas' unethical behavior, as well as Jenny Thomas' involvement in a coup, additionally questions the possibility of Donald Trump running for office again, considering his criminal indictment. And this is the point of AOC saying what she's saying about Bob Menendez. This is the point. It's for these people like this, these voters or people who speak about it, because I think he's a Democrat grassroots influencer. It's to point out, see, Democrats have integrity. Democrats are better at X, Y, and Z. It's to give that sliver of difference, so to give people a reason. But this little sliver is getting smaller and smaller by the day. And I think I'm going to end it there with this story here. And let's get into the next story, which is, that was AOC Face the Nation. You can see some of the other stories we're going to be doing tomorrow, Nick and CJ. But I think I want to go here. Let's listen to this clip here. Here is Matt Duss. And if you don't know who Matt Duss is, and it's Duss, D-U-S-S. If you don't know who Matt Duss is a former Bernie Sanders. Former Bernie foreign policy advisor, the neocon. And that is Matt Duss, D-U-S-S. I'm not saying dusk. So this is the NATO left, and they're having a conversation. And why we call them the NATO left? Because they support NATO. They support NATO by their votes. They support NATO by the people they support in Congress. And that is the Squad and Bernie Sanders. So this is the reason why we call them the NATO left. So the NATO left, and this is Matt Duss on the Majority Report with Sam Seder. It's talking about Ukraine. This is a short clip, and then I'll bring up the actual video, the full video. So, but before we do that, we're at 530 people watching. Hit that like button. We're gonna up our target to 450. 450 is the new target for likes. If you hit that like button, much appreciated. Also, if you didn't hear JB, go watch his video from the Orlando chapter. Had an event yesterday. The Orlando RBN chapter had an event yesterday where they gave out hygiene kits to the unhoused, and there's a video of it, so you can go check that out. Make sure you do that. We're sitting at 247 likes. The target is 450. The target 450. Let me read a couple of super chats, and then we're gonna get to this story. I see 2 super chats here. First one reads this way: thanks, CJ. I love RBN. Keep being uncompromising. And that's from Super Seamstress Sewing Show. And then another one from Abiding 71, always showing love with super stickers. Thank you, Abiding 71. And then let's see who's in the not super chat, but let's see who's in the regular chat. Mr. Says Majority Port are vaxxed up warmongers. I didn't know that. I didn't know the COVID part of that. So I'll just throw up a couple of comments here. All right, so let's get to this. Let's get to this story here. This won't be as long as the AOC story, because AOC covered a lot of different topics. So wanted to make sure we get those in, and I know Aaron will clip those separately. Just throwing a couple of your guys' comments up. Thank you for all of your comments. Thank you for that. All right, so hit that like button. Like I said, last time I checked, we're at 247 likes. The target is 470. The target is 247. 447. The target is 470. I'm sorry, 450. I keep mixing it up. And then we've had over 1,100 people come through at some point. Now let's get to the story that you see on the screen there. And the NATO, and we can start here, Aaron. The NATO left. So Matt Duss goes on the Majority Report, and in the live stream, this is because this is part of a live stream. They haven't clipped just his segment yet. So if you want to go see this, you got to watch the entire live stream or go find it in the live stream. But Matt Duss is a neocon, but he happens to be the former foreign policy advisor to Bernie Sanders. So Bernie Sanders had a neocon advising him, and they're all on board with Ukraine. We've done several segments on Matt Duss. He was on Democracy Now! Debating Ray McGovern one time. Ray McGovern wiped him clean. Then he was also on TYT and a couple of other times. But now he's on the Majority Report. This is who they lean on. This is who isn't afraid to be I'm left, supposedly. And actually, I don't know if he's ever said that. They just bring him on. They assume he is, I guess, because he was Bernie Sanders' foreign policy advisor. So I guess maybe they assume he's left. But in his rhetoric about war, and specifically the Ukraine war, is just not. And we'll get to that, to more of his comments after we listen to this first clip. Is about a minute and a half. Let's listen.
Give us your perspective on the. I mean, I think the perspective on the war is fairly straightforward. Russia invaded, and Ukraine is pushing them at least back. How much do you know? How much territory since, we started providing aid? How much territory has Ukrainians regained? I mean, how effective has this been? Because a lot of people were saying on day one that when the United States was starting to provide aid, we shouldn't do this. We should settle for a negotiated settlement right now. You can't win, and that's it.
As of last year, I mean, the Ukrainians have taken back some 50% of what the Russians controlled at one point. That includes last year's counteroffensive and this year's counteroffensive, which has been moving much slower. There's a number of reasons for that. I think everyone was amazed and impressed by what the Ukrainians were able to achieve last year, about a year ago, especially in cities like Kherson. But what happened in those where you had Russian troops that were not dug in, they were fairly green. A lot of them just fled. That's not to take anything away from the Ukrainians who fought bravely. But a year later, the Russians are much more dug in. They've created much more layered minefields, and it's just much slower going for the Ukrainians, but they are slowly making progress. Obviously, the Ukrainians are telling their story about what they've been trying to do. We've been seeing some leaked criticisms from the Biden administration about, the pace of this or the way that they are or are not able to kind of integrate forces and to make greater gains. But there's no question that it's going much slower than a year ago.
I wanted to let it play all the way. That essentially was lies from beginning to the end. That they've taken back 50%. So the counteroffensive is not going well, but they've taken back 50%. That was literally just, I mean, for most of you who watches all the time, we do these segments all the time about Ukraine. We just did a Ukraine segment 2 days ago, recovering Ukraine funding and the attempt to get more funding. But we do these Ukraine stories all the time, especially Nick. This is nonsense. So let's replay it, and then I'll go to the larger clip in just a second.
Give us your perspective on the. I mean, I think the perspective on the war is fairly straightforward.
You see the stuttering. You see the stuttering. Now because it's in the beginning of it, it doesn't seem so glaring. But when we go to the clip and you see how he's talking normal, and then when he gets to this particular part, he starts to stutter right there. It's a clear indication that the NATO left is uneasy talking about Ukraine. If you go to their channels, the topic Ukraine is probably the thing they talk about the least, along with elected progressives, because it's just no good news in this. They don't talk about it that much at all, if at all, if they make clips at all. So he understands, what the vast majority of left believes about this. So it's an uneasy situation. They don't want to create any sort of sound bites or anything like that. And you can see, or at least I feel like that's top of mind when he's speaking here as he's stuttering in the beginning of this clip.
Give us your perspective on the. I mean, I think the perspective on the war is fairly straightforward.
He didn't know how to describe it. He didn't know how to describe it. He had to find the most non taking a stance way to describe it. So he's not like, I'm not for it, I'm not against it, I'm not saying nothing. That's what he was trying to find the words to do that. Let's rewind and play again.
Give us your perspective on the. I mean, I think the perspective on the war is fairly straightforward. Russia invaded, and Ukraine is pushing them at least back. How much do you know? How much territory since, like, we started providing aid? How much territory has the Ukrainians regained? I mean, like, how effective has this been? Because a lot of people were saying on day one that when the United States was starting to provide aid, we shouldn't do this. We should settle for a negotiated settlement right now. You can't win, and that's it.
As of last year.
So he's saying the silly leftists were saying we shouldn't do this. We should just negotiate a long time ago. So basically, he's trying to set up a comparison. If they had negotiated a long time ago, would they have lost more or gained more in comparison of what the bullshit answer you're about to give us now, Matt Duss? And the 50%, you get what I'm saying? So Matt Duss is participating in this war propaganda by pretending that somehow they've gotten something out of it tangible to say that it's been worth it. That's what he's trying to do. So where is it at? Let's continue.
I mean, the Ukrainians have taken back some 50% of what the Russians controlled at one point. That includes last year's counteroffensive and this year's counteroffensive, which has been moving much slower. There's a number of reasons for that. I think everyone was amazed and impressed by what the Ukrainians were able to achieve last year.
No one was amazed or impressed at all. That's the image you want to project. No one was amazed or impressed. No one.
Here about a year ago, especially in cities like Kherson, but what happened in those where you had Russian troops that were not dug in, they were fairly green. A lot of them just fled. That's not to take anything away from the Ukrainians who fought bravely.
You said they just left, but I don't want to take anything from their fighting. Like he's not making any sense. Let's let him dig his own grave here. Let's let him continue.
But a year later, the Russians are much more dug in. They've created much more layered minefields, and it's just much slower going for the Ukrainians. But they are slow.
This is the excuse for the counteroffensive being a terrible failure. You see how he's not. You see how the left label. What is different in his analysis of the war? It's the same, staying within the same boundaries, approved boundaries of the ruling class. So let's continue.
Slowly making progress. Obviously, the Ukrainians are telling their story about what they've been trying to do. We've been seeing some leaked criticisms from the Biden administration about the pace of this or the way that they are or are not able to kind of integrate forces and to make greater gains. But there's no question that it's going much slower than a year ago.
All right, we're gonna get to the full clip in just a second here.
Give us your perspective on the.
Let's pause that. Yeah, we'll give it. So let me see. Do I have any other reaction here? This is Eddie from Midwestern Marx. Midwestern Marx Institute. Let's see what his critique of this particular clip. And shout out to Eddie. I don't know how these people can be critical of the corporate media the same way I am, but then at the same time live in a completely alternative reality crafted for them by the corporate media. Like, seriously, this is delusional, meaning you're standing within the same confines. You're independent media, but you're standing within the same confines of the framing of this as corporate media. Great point, Eddie. Let's see. I didn't even do this earlier. Sam Seder. Sam Seder. Let's do Matt. Let's see if there's any other reaction that we might want to read here that might give us a little more depth of insight. Maybe not. Let me do Matt Duss. Oh, you know what? He has me blocked, so maybe that, yeah, it's not gonna come up, but the regular video. Let's read this one. Oh no, I read that one. Anyway, let's just play the video instead of trying to find another clip. Yeah, let's just play the video. Here it goes, right? Actually, let me bring it up on, because I already have it queued. So let's just play the long video instead of trying to find other clips that show. So let's bring it up. Like I said, now this is Ukraine, Iran, Lula critiquing Biden's foreign policy from the left. This is critiquing him from, oh, my eyes. Oh man, I didn't read the title. Critiquing him from the left. My eyes. Good Lord. Yes, that's what that says. So if you want to go see this, yeah, please do.
Other positions that are a function of who is paying it. General Assembly. Poland just announced that they're going to. All right, let's get to Ukraine.
And that's what we're gonna get to. So they finally push on to Ukraine here. So let's listen in to the discussion on Ukraine. Yeah.
Zelensky in town at the General Assembly. Poland just announced that they're going to no longer provide any more weapons. I think Zelensky's up in Canada right now, actually talking to their
Trudeau,
to Trudeau, and I think maybe he's going to address their parliament. I'm not quite sure about that, but address just like where we're at. What are the implications of Poland, and like what do you think is going on here? Because it is there is a dropping support for continuing arming. We've been, this has been escalating in terms of how much money and how much support we're giving. Give us your perspective on this.
I mean, I think quick take on Poland is just remember they've got an election in a few weeks. So, I mean, that is playing a role here. I mean, Poland has been actually extremely supportive, even though they got a very right-leaning government. I mean, the Poles have been very, very generous to the Ukrainian neighbors and sort of in terms of bringing them in, providing a place for them, accepting all these refugees. There's issues with regard to Ukraine's grain.
Think about the comment. Let's analyze the comment and what it says about the left. So let's step out of the box and listen. Let me rewind it and listen to what he says here. Just can't believe this. This is the left. This is so bizarre how we've switched roles here. So let's listen again.
Much money and how much support we're giving. Give us your perspective on this.
I mean, I think quick take on Poland is just remember they've got an election in a few weeks. So, I mean, that is playing a role here.
So Poland is saying we're not going to be sending as much support. And Matt Duss's critique, or at least analysis of that, is that, it's an election. So you're meaning that the people of Poland don't want it. But you're just, in a couple of seconds, are going to boast about how Poland was a very strong backer of Ukraine. So you mean Poland leadership was backing Ukraine over what the people wanted to do, Matt? And that's a good thing, Matt? That's a good thing, Matt. And this is from a left perspective.
I mean, Poland has been actually extremely supportive, even though they got a very right-leaning government. I mean, the Poles have been very, very generous to the Ukrainian neighbors and sort of in terms of bringing them in, providing a place for them, accepting all these refugees. There's issues with regard to Ukraine's grain shipments, which are competing with Polish grain. The Poles have allowed the grain to transit Poland, but they don't want it to be sold in the Polish market. So there's a few things going on here, but yes, it also has to do with some, I guess, questions and some exhaustion on where is this war going.
And the thing that he clearly knows is the biggest thing he just kind of plays it off. And yeah, I guess there's a little bit of exhaustion going on too with the war. Again, everybody, this is from the left. This is supposed to be an analysis from the left. Matt Duss, if you didn't know, that is the number one reason, sir. People are done with this war. And you're trying to act like, yes, it's a few. That's the minor, very minor reason. And if you didn't hear it, so let me play it again. Let me go back 13 seconds.
To transit Poland, but they don't want it to, to be sold in the Polish market. So there's a few things going on here, but yes, it also has to do with some, I guess, questions and some exhaustion on where is this war going.
That's the left.
But in general, I think the way that Poland has handled the influx of Ukrainian refugees and the war in general has been fairly admirable.
And so, is it going to have implications?
Like, he's talking in circles, because how are you saying that it's an election? That's why they're backing off. Obviously, the people don't want it. And then you play down the fact that I guess there's some discontent and people don't want it. But isn't that the whole reason you're saying about the polling? You see how the professional managerial class with all their degrees, they just say shit. But if you listen closely, it's easy to break that shit down. Let's continue with the interview.
Are there ending of military support? Is that going to have broad implications? Like, how much military support would they provide?
Some, not a lot. And what I've heard from folks is, like, after the elections, they will probably reverse that. Who knows what will happen? But of course, the vast majority of military aid is coming from the United States.
So he's hearing that Polish leadership is only doing this, not supporting Ukraine until the election over, and then they're going to go back, and you don't have a critique for that. That is not part of your point. It's just a afterthought, like a footnote to what you're saying. This is from the left, everybody.
States and other countries in Europe, but it's as a political message. It's one we should take note of.
Give us your perspective on the. I think the perspective on the war is fairly straightforward.
You see. Now, when I played it in an earlier clip where we started here, the stuttering wasn't so profound, but you see how we've been listening to the normal conversation, and that sticks out a lot more when we get specifically trying to narrow down what do we think about Ukraine. Then he begins to stutter. It's so funny to me. Let me go back. 28 seconds.
Broad implications, like how much military support would they provide?
I'm sorry. Let me go back a little more. It looks like it's a little more. Where did I leave off? 31. Let's go here. All right, let's go here.
This war going, but in general,
it's very noticeable, the stuttering. So we'll hear it right away.
I think the way that Poland has handled the influx of Ukrainian refugees and the war in general has been fairly admirable.
And so, is it going to have implications on? Are there ending of military support? Is that going to have broad implications? Like, how much military support would they provide?
Some, not a lot. And what I've heard from folks is, like, after the elections, they will probably reverse that. Who knows what will happen? But of course, the vast majority of military aid is coming from the United States and other countries in Europe. But it's as a political message. It's one we should take note of.
Give us your perspective on the. I think the perspective on the war is fairly straightforward. Russia invaded, and Ukraine is pushing them at least back. How much do you know? How much territory since we started providing aid? How much territory has Ukrainians regained? How effective has this been? Because a lot of people were saying on day one that when the United States was starting to provide aid, we shouldn't do this. We should settle for a negotiated settlement right now. You can't win, and that's it.
As of last year, I mean, the Ukrainians have taken back some 50% of what the Russians controlled at one point.
Made up.
That includes last year's counteroffensive and this year's counteroffensive, which has been moving much slower. There's a number of reasons for that. I think everyone was
everybody's
amazed
dead.
and impressed by
Like
how what
400
the
dead
Ukrainians were able to achieve last year, about a year ago, especially in cities like Kherson. You know, but what happened in those where you had Russian troops that were not dug in, they were fairly green. A lot of them just fled. That's not to take anything away from the Ukrainians who fought bravely. But, you know, a year later, the Russians are much more dug in. They've created much more layered minefields, and it's just much slower going for the Ukrainians, but they are slowly making progress. Obviously, the Ukrainians are telling their story about what they've been trying to do. We've been seeing some leaked criticisms from the Biden administration about, you know, the pace of this or the way that they are or are not able to kind of integrate forces and to make greater gains. But there's no question that it's going much slower than a year ago.
So, and overall, like, I mean, is this something from your perspective that we should be doing? Is there a limiting principle on this?
Well, I think the Biden administration, and in my view, rightly, have always, you know, they've been clear about what
they're so uneasy with this topic. And she is, you notice she hasn't said a fucking peep. She's like, I'm keeping my mouth shut unless I absolutely have to speak. But watch how she sips her drink when this very important question is asked.
Something from your perspective that we should be doing? Is there is there a limiting principle on this?
Well, I think the Biden administration, and in my view, rightly, have always, you know, they've been clear about what they want to see here, and that's Ukraine to take back control of their country and for Russia to stop the war. But they've also been fairly restrained and careful about the amount and quality of military assistance they've been giving.
They've been very restrained and careful by the military assistance they've been given. And again, so from the left, in theory, you would think the left would have any critique. Would have a critique, I should say. But a critique, I should say, of the Ukraine war and what the president has been doing. A president that is to your right. That's generally what you would think. But of course, we're talking about the NATO left and infiltrators like this guy, Matt Duss. And let me rewind it, and we're going to hear him say this last part once again, 10 seconds.
Country and for Russia to stop the war. But they've also been fairly restrained and careful about the amount and quality of military assistance they've been giving, because
they've been very restrained about the quality and everything they've been given, the military assistance they've been given to Ukraine. Let's see if that's accurate. I think they got this here. Where is that? Oh yeah. Ukraine clusters. Because I wonder, is he familiar with the cluster bombs? I mean, do I need to bring up that? I guess I could bring up that receipt. Let me see if I can find it. I was going to bring up a different one. But I guess that would be a more, I guess you can say, important one. Let's go to Google. I know you guys see the video up, but I'm going to look for this receipt because I do want to insert it here, because the way he's describing that he has been restrained, Ukraine. Let's see. Let's see here. Here goes a news clipping. I want to bring up one. Wow. Okay. All right. So let's use this one right here. This is a good one to use. Or, wow, there's so many. No, let's use this one. Because I don't think this is going to ad block me. Hopefully it doesn't ad block me here. Let's see. All right. Let me bring this down. We'll see if it ad blocked me. If it does, I'll just bring up a different one. But let's insert this here. Sorry for the long delay. I just think it's important to show this, and in the clip, when Erin clips this, it won't be as long as a pause when she clips this. But it is important to have this sort of receipt, these headlines in this segment to show, to counter what this guy is saying. Because it's nonsense. Oh, wow. I guess it was. I guess I was before I even got to it. Oh, no. There it goes. Right there. My bad, everybody. My bad. So let's stop it right there. All right. You see it. U.S. sending long-range cluster munitions to Ukraine, report says. Remember Matt Duss in a video with the NATO left and Sam Seder and Emma Vigeland said that Joe Biden has been very restrained, because the question that was asked is that, what is your assessment? Do you agree with what Joe Biden has been doing? It's like, yeah, this guy's been kind of very restrained by the way that he's been going about doing it. He's been very restrained. So the question is, from a left perspective, because that's what this video says, critiquing Biden, or at least speaking about Biden's Ukraine policy Ukraine policy from the left. How do you not have a critique of that? How do you not have a critique? How is that one of your talking points as a good thing for Joe Biden? That's a better way of saying it. Now, let's go back that I showed that receipt there. Now let's go back to the video where you're speaking. And again, remember Matt Duss just said that he has been restrained. And let's listen to him again.
Something from your perspective that we should be doing? Is there a limiting principle on this?
Well, I think the Biden administration, and in my view, rightly, have always, they've been clear about what they want to see here, and that's Ukraine to take back control of their country and for Russia to stop the war. But they've also been fairly restrained and careful about the amount and.
He's also been very clear about Sweden and Finland joining NATO. Are you going to say anything about that? He's also been very clear about sending Ukraine tanks that use 60 gallons of fossil fuels, and in other words, gasoline, per hour. So we're knocking out climate change. So two birds with one stone, right?
Quality of military assistance they've been giving, because Putin has nuclear weapons, and we do want to be careful that we don't trigger a nuclear war. Some people criticize him for that. I think that's entirely reasonable. I don't want to die in a nuclear war. The Ukrainians don't want to die in a nuclear exchange. But all along the way, as the Ukrainians have tested these ideas, Putin has not responded or escalated as some.
You notice how he's downplaying what he's saying. They tested the ideas. You mean they've been acting unhinged? They've been acting unhinged, Matt Duss, but you want to say that Ukraine has been testing these boundaries that Russia has put up. And Matt says, but they haven't been doing nothing about us poking the bear. So just keep pushing. Is that what you're saying, Matt? Let's listen.
Initially feared. We've seen multiple, you all saw the news about Elon Musk turning off Starlink because he did not want to enable an attack on Sevastopol. We've seen multiple attacks on Sevastopol by the Ukrainians, including, the night before I arrived in Kyiv last week. And we didn't see any kind of escalation or particular escalation.
This is, I can't say this enough. This is the left perspective. He's answering the question, what is your assessment of this? Do you agree sort of what Biden's approach? And you want to point out that the fact that Ukraine is pushing the envelope with Russia in their red lines, and Russia is not being retaliatory or having any vengeance. Look, we can keep pushing, and this is the left perspective
by the Russians in response to that.
Okay, so what did you see when you were in Kyiv?
Yeah. What I saw in Kyiv was a city that the war was almost not in evidence. Ukraine is very well protected by anti-aircraft, by Patriot missile batteries, anti-missile batteries. Certainly you saw soldiers around. You saw certain areas of the city, but only a few closed off. You saw patriotic posters and slogans, though I was interested to see that there is no Zelensky cult of personality. I don't think I saw a single poster.
Yeah, maybe not there. Maybe there's no Zelensky cult of personality where you are, sir. But there's definitely Zelensky cult of personality here. And I do want to end it there with because they talk about some other stuff and then they move on. And I do want to save some of this for Zelensky Congress. So cult of personality, they don't have that in Ukraine. So let's see if they have that here in the United States. And I'm going to just pick a random, let's close that player. Yeah, let's close that player. I'm just going to pick a random, let's go to CNN. Let's see. I think, was it a CNN? They were calling them this, just a great leader. Let's see if was it a CNN clip that I saw? I believe it was CNN. When he came down here to Congress, they put out a bunch of nonsense on this guy, Zelensky. So let's watch a little bit of it. I'm almost there. Once this updates here. All right. Right. Wow. Was it Zelensky? Was it here? It was MSNBC. My bad, everybody. MSNBC. This story kind of is evolving for me. But I do want to address the part of cult of personality. It was a clip, and I know I saw it on YouTube. It was one of the corporate networks, so it must have been this one. And I think it was actually a clip with him. Okay, here it goes. Yeah, it's a clip here. I think this is the one. But let's listen. Yeah, this is the one. I think I just saw the bald-headed guy. So let's listen to this clip. Let's listen to see a cult of personality. And I'm going to let this play a little bit. And this is about Ukraine. Let's listen.
This week, parts of New York City turned into an absolute parking lot. Thanks to the United Nations General Assembly, President Biden came to speak. So did Ukrainian President Zelensky, who made his pitch to keep support coming in their fight against Russia's invasion. All right, Peter, how do you think? Well, we'll start with Zelensky. How do you think he did?
Well, I always think he does good. I'm kind of in the tank for Vladimir Zelensky as a comedian. You know, he was a former comedian.
That's not a cult. That's definitely not a cult of personality.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he has done is been one of the most important leaders of our time. I've been against every war.
That guy said Zelensky has been one of the most important leaders of our time. So when Matt Dutt says there's no cult of personality in Ukraine, maybe that's in Ukraine. Because the people on the ground there really know what's going on. So they can sell a cult of personality in Ukraine. But they can sell it here. This guy just says, let me, and he goes on. So I'm going to rewind it a little bit and then let him play it. And then play it. But listen.
Now he's president, so I have hope.
Different role now, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he has done is been one of the most important leaders of our time. I've been against every war of my generation.
Foreign leaders
worked with
of our time.
veterans. I've seen horrible things happen to our American veterans community as a result of Iraq and Afghanistan war. This is a war that I think is so important for the American people to support. And I think what Vladimir Zelensky and the Ukrainian people and young people have done, I watch in every day in amazement and in deep privilege, knowing hopefully that my family will never have to be in that position. And yet today, he was disinvited from being able to speak to a joint session of Congress, which I just thought was so reprehensible.
And we may not.
Cult of personality. It's not in Ukraine, but it's definitely on our shores, Matt does. So you should check that out. But yeah, I was so lucky to find that clip as quickly as I did. But let's move on to a couple of quick stories. Those were the two main big stories, and I got a couple of quick hitters before we get out of here. Yeah. I did that. Oh, maybe it's just this one. Oh yeah, and then a little bit of Trump. So two more segments here. We're gonna move on to this next segment where Aaron Monte and Glenn Greenwald call out Bill Kristol, and it's for this ad right here. So let me click on it and set this up the right way. It's a 30-second ad, and it's premiered today on all of these Sunday talk shows, and that's what he says when he premieres it. Where is it at? Where do I have? Here we go. Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Monte roast Bill Kristol, and they do in a glorious fashion. Let me close this one here and do this here. Now, I do want to shout out a couple of things here. First thing is our Patreon. If you would like to become a member of our Patreon, I think we have a tier for each member. So there's 5 tiers, and then we all have like a little special name for the tiers. So make sure you check that out. You can create a tier. So I think $2 a month is the cheapest you could do. So if you go on their Patreon and join and become a Patreon member for RBN, you can be a member for as little as $2 a month. The other thing is, let's hit that like button. We're trying to get to our goal of 450 likes. And then here's our website. This is the last announcement. Pod is our website and merchandise, because we now have merchandise. I'm trying to remember to shout this out. I forgot to do it the last stream, I believe. Did I come on Friday? Did we do it? So here's our website here. I'll show you that first. You can check out many things on our website. And then on the right side, this is a new thing on here, top right, the hyperlink RBN merch. If you click that one, if you click RBN merch, then it takes you to our new store. It is just about a week old, or coming up on a week old. Maybe tomorrow's a week old. And it takes you to this here, where you can see our different merchandise from our mugs. Now, each design you see, it's like a few designs. I can't even remember. It's a few designs. And then those designs, that's 9 there. Was 11 designs, and then each design is on different merchandise. So that's 11 design on mugs. Then those same 11 designs you can see on tote bags. Then those same 11 designs you can see on clothing, whether it's t-shirts, tanks, sweaters. We also got sweatshirts, and that's without the hood, right? So if you click on, for example, let's look at some other ones we've never seen before. Let's go to Completely Unserious. So this is just a shirt, a long sleeve shirt you can get with Nick's classic line, Completely Unserious. You can get a different color. Let's say if you want it in blue, Completely Unserious. Let's say if you want it in whatever color it is, yellow, Completely Unserious. What happens if I hit the back button? Where does it take me? It does never take me back to the clothing. All right, got to get that updated. Oh, let me show you a couple of other items here. So we showed you that NATO is probably The NATO one is one of our most popular ones, but let me show you some of the other ones. Let me show you something in pink. This has a pink color. This is the lesser of two evils is what got us here. The lesser of two evils is what got us here. And this you can get in pink. The lesser of two evils is what got us here. So all this merchandise you can go check out. And of course, they got some other colors here. They got the yellow. I really like the yellow. They got the powder blue or blue. I don't know what you call it. And then they got the gray. They got the white. But I like the pink. Think I might get that for my daughters. So check that out. All right. So there you go with the announcements. And now let's move on to the final story or final two stories. And the next one is, where am I? Aaron Mate Aaron Mate and Glenn Greenwald sparring with Bill Kristol. Let's put up the banner, and this is where we will start. Aaron? All right, so Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Mate actually call out Bill Kristol for this lame ad I'm about to show you. So they seeing the support sort of fade with the GOP, and Bill Kristol puts out this ad, or Bill Kristol and his people put out this ad about trying to push. This is an ad about war, advocating for war support. So this is not even advocating for red or blue or voting or anything like that. This is advocating for GOP to support the Ukraine war. And then we'll go into the analysis by Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Mate. But here is the ad. It's 30 seconds long.
When America arms Ukraine, we get a lot for a little. Putin is an enemy of America. We've used 5% of our defense budget to arm Ukraine, and with it, they've destroyed 50% of Putin's army. We've done all this by sending weapons from storage, not our troops. The more Ukraine weakens Russia, the more it also weakens Russia's closest ally, China. America needs to stand strong against our enemies. That's why Republicans in Congress must continue to support Ukraine. When America arms Ukraine, we get a lot for a little. Putin is an enemy of America. We've used 5% of our defense budget to arm Ukraine, and with it, they've destroyed 50% of Putin's army. We've done all this by sending weapons from storage, not our troops. The more Ukraine weakens Russia, the more it also weakens Russia's closest ally, China. America needs to stand strong against our enemies. That's why Republicans in Congress must continue to support Ukraine.
Republicans for Ukraine, GOP for Ukraine.com. Paid for by Defending Democracy Together. Do you love those names that these lobbyists, these scumbag super PAC people give to fool the average American? But let's zoom out of this video. Let's see what he posted as a caption. It says, this ad will air on Sunday's show tomorrow in D.C. You're back. Family are back from volleyball. How was volleyball, Gigi or KK?
Good. And we're at a new toy picnic.
Did you see it at the door? Oh, I'll talk to you when I'm out of here. Yeah, I'll talk to you when I'm out of here. All right, so family's back. But anyway, that's what Bill Kristol says. And now let's look and see what Aaron Mate and Glenn Greenwald says. We're going to start with Glenn Greenwald. And let's look at his analysis, or at least his tweet on the matter. And it says here, Bill Kristol, arguably the neocon who led, let me make sure my sound is good. Arguably the neocon who has lied most pathologically and compulsively over the last 3 decades, and who has the greatest amount of innocent blood on his hands, is now producing propaganda for Biden's war, a war policy that only U.S. liberals overwhelmingly support. spot on by Glenn Greenwald, and it's an actual thread. Unless he continues, and Glenn goes on to say, Bill Kristol on his own current partisan identification and which party he sees as the best instrument to advance his neocon worldview. This is an excerpt. He's pulling out a receipt here, and it says, "Quote." It says, when asked where he was politically, Bill Kristol told TNR, "I'm pretty comfortable with the current Democratic Party. We are okay with Biden. We think, in fact, one thing we could do is strengthen the moderate Democratic Party." Just shameful. So this guy, Bill Kristol, understand he's not a Democrat. He's not a progressive. He doesn't want any of the things that all of you want. He's saying, I'm with the Democrats. But Marianne Williamson doesn't want to admit that Democratic Party are now the war party. She doesn't want to admit like the Democrats are worse, and they are. Now let's go to Aaron Mate's critique of this. And it says, Bill Kristol makes an ad urging GOP to keep funding the Ukraine proxy war. The pitch, when we weaken Russia, we weaken China. How lucky for Bill that he doesn't have to make an ad targeting Democrats on Ukraine. They're 100% on board with Bill and fellow pro-war neocons. And I did want to zoom in on this point here when we get back to the video, and that is weaken China. So in order to get GOP on board, you have to say this is going to weaken the other people you want to go to
Putin is
war
an
with.
enemy of America. We've used 5% of our defense budget to arm Ukraine.
So they're trying to say this is not even a lot of money. It's just $100 billion. But if we turn around and say we need $100 billion to go to average working day people, then we go, who's going to pay for it? I'm going to rewind it to play it from the beginning.
America arms Ukraine. We get a lot for a little. Putin is an enemy of America. We've used 5%.
Again, understand the $115 billion. They're saying that's a little. They're saying that's a little.
% of our defense budget to arm Ukraine, and with it, they've destroyed 50% of Putin's army. We've done.
That's just made up. 50% of his army is the joke.
All this by sending weapons from storage, not our troops.
Sending weapons from storage and promising tanks. Did we forget about the tanks that's not even made yet, that they're making the ship later? So that's another lie.
The more Ukraine weakens Russia, the more it also weakens Russia's.
That's how they're selling it to another neocon. You're a neocon, but just a different way. You're a neocon against China. I'm a neocon against Russia. So listen, be a little neoconish against Russia. It helps you in your neoconish against China. That's the selling point.
Closest ally, China. America needs to stand strong against our enemies. That's why Republicans in Congress must continue to support Ukraine.
Just absurd that they have to make an ad. They should be making an ad. This should be targeting AOC and the squad and people on the left is who should be targeted about these ads if they were standing up in the way that they should. But shout out to Aaron Mate. I say Mate, but he says, I always hear him say Mate, and Glenn Greenwald for both of their brief but precise critiques of Bill Kristol. So I think I'm going to move on just to show a little bit about, because I do want to show a little bit on Trump. So we're going to move to the final segment, which is Trump, and it's not this. So is it moving? Is it moving? Is it moving? Is it moving? It is moving. Okay, so Meet the Press is what I'm looking for. Where's Meet the Press? Meet the Press. Meet the Press. Is it not here? Thought I had it, but I guess I can. I'm pretty sure you guys might have saw it, but we're going to meet the press. Where did I have that video? Yeah, I thought it was Meet the Press. I swear it's Meet the Press. But anyway, I shall look it up and play it now. So as we're waiting in between segments, if you could please hit that like button. Oops. Shoot. I guess I was supposed to click the other thing. Meet the Press. Everybody. I don't. Oh yeah, I gotta do it from here. Is this the latest episode? Yes. Okie dokie. Now I'm gonna queue it up. It's in the beginning, but I do want to skip like the 45 seconds of other stuff they talk about. But in the meanwhile, hit that like button. The goal was 475.
You to be on my team.
That was the worst.
The goal was 475. So if you hit that like button, that'll get us closer to our goal. I guess I can let the whole thing play. Yeah, I can let the whole thing play. It's not a big deal. So yeah, they mention, I think Bob Menendez, but it's just briefly, so it doesn't matter if they say that as far as the segment. So Aaron, let me make sure I have the right banner up here for this final segment here. Liberal media turns on by. Okay, yeah, we do got it. All right, Aaron, this is the last segment, and you can start it here. Liberal media turns on Biden, and Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden by a lot more now. It's a new Washington Post poll that came out. We will be covering it more in depth tomorrow for the Nick and CJ show, but I do want to cover this aspect, this Meet the Press short little segment. It's like 5 minutes that I want to cover as part of the larger, broader thing that we're going to be covering tomorrow. So let's play this Meet the Press now. I'm playing it from the beginning, so there's a little build up in the first 30 seconds or so that we're going to watch before she actually gets into the numbers with Steve Kornacki. So let's listen. Oops, let's turn the sound on.
A new NBC News poll shows an overwhelming majority of voters have concerns about President Biden and former President Donald Trump.
I got the job done. I got it done.
As the GOP candidates get ready to debate for a second time without Trump, will any of them be able to break through?
I don't think we need people who are in it for themselves, seeking retribution.
Yeah, because you're not in it for that. You're in it as a plant. You're a media plant.
Dominating the party, plus shutdown risk. House Republicans struggle to agree on spending bills, and now another government shutdown is just days away.
This is a whole new concept of individuals that just want to burn the whole place down.
That should be AOC. They should be saying that about AOC. This guy is a robot.
Of a civil
I swear he's AI.
war.
Will Speaker McCarthy turn to Democrats for help? I'll talk to Democratic Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. And taking bribes. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey resisting calls to resign.
The senator and his wife accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars of bribes.
Federal agents found gold bars and cash stuffed in envelopes hidden in the senator's clothing. How damaging will this be for Senate
They're
Democrats?
all corrupt.
Joining me for insight and analysis
They're all
are
corrupt.
NBC News Chief White House Correspondent.
The longest running show in television history.
All right, so you saw all the stories they cover, and now we're going to get here, so I'm sure that'll be edited out in the clip. But now let's get into the actual part that we're here to cover, and that's right here.
This is Meet the Press with Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning. Here in Washington, dysfunction is on full display. The federal government is careening toward a shutdown just 1 week from today with no deal in sight. As one top House Republican lawmaker told me overnight, quote, "It appears that's where we're headed. as hardline Republicans dig in on their demands for deep spending cuts, while threatening to replace Speaker McCarthy, who warned this week they want to, quote, burn the whole place down. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez is resisting calls to resign after being indicted for allegedly taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes to benefit the Egyptian government. Prosecutors releasing stunning photos, including wads of cash they found stuffed into a monogram jacket when they searched the Menendez home, gold bars, and a Mercedes-Benz. The indictment appears to undercut Republican allegations of a two-tiered system. Reagan Presidential Library. But is it too late to break through? Our brand new NBC News.
All right. Take you so long to get into it. Anytime it's bad news about Biden, they take a long time to get to that shit. So we are finally here. All right, now we can finally analyze what we're here to analyze.
Days, Mr. Trump's Republican rivals will try to make their own contrast at the second Republican debate at the Reagan Presidential Library. But is it too late to break through? Our brand new NBC News poll shows they have an uphill climb. I am joined now by national political correspondent Steve Kornacki to take us
These numbers are not good.
Steve, it's so great to have you here. A lot of headlines in this new poll.
Yeah. So she does the show a little bit different. And this is one of the differences in bringing on somebody else to do the numbers when they would open. So if you don't know, this is her second full day as being now the new host. Chuck Todd no longer hosts. Chuck Todd does these numbers normally, but she brings somebody else on and does it in a different way where she's asking questions. So that's a difference.
Kristen, you mentioned an uphill climb for these Republican opponents of Donald Trump. Let's show folks from our new poll exactly how steep it is. Look at this. Donald Trump, brand new national poll of Republican primary voters, nearly 60% support the former president. His nearest rival, Ron DeSantis, more than 40 points behind him now. Obviously, you can see here nobody else in single digits.
So their propaganda and the 91 charges is not working.
In June, Trump seemed to have a dominant lead then. It has only gotten more dominant from.
So he's gained 8 points. So over time, they've been doing propaganda. It's June and now it's September. So July, August. So at least 2 months. 2 months of intense propaganda. This is when all of these charges fail. This is when all the most fever pitch propaganda against Donald Trump was going on, and the numbers go up for him. Not a good sign.
43 now. It was not even 30 in June. And you can see here, we asked the question. I think this gets to the heart of it. We asked Republicans, should Donald Trump be the leader of your party? And now nearly 60% say yes. It wasn't quite 50 at the start of the summer.
Well,
those numbers are going opposite. If you're legacy media, you're going, why isn't our propaganda working? The numbers are going the opposite way. And I think it also speaks to the reason why they're now more willing to go after Joe Biden, because there are some in the ruling class and the establishment that do want him gone. They know that this guy cannot win and they want him gone. So, but let's continue. Let's listen to the question she has. I'm going to rewind in 15 seconds and let it play out.
From 43 now, it was not even 30 in June. And you can see here, we asked the question. I think this gets to the heart of it. We asked Republicans, should Donald Trump be the leader of your party? And now nearly 60% say yes. It wasn't quite 50 at the start of the summer.
Well, Stephen, what's so stunning about this number, lots happened since June. We're talking 2 more indictments against former President Trump, so 4 in total, and the first GOP primary debate. And yet, Mr. Trump is just solidifying his lead with GOP voters.
And Kristen, you know this from talking to Republican critics of Trump from rival campaigns. Everything you just explained, they thought would take him down a peg this summer. And instead, he has only moved up here. You can see the numbers saying the party needs a new leader. That has gone down. So for Donald Trump there, nothing but good news. And it raises this question. If Republicans go forward and nominate Trump again, this is what the rematch in our poll would look like right now. 46-46. And you remember, in 2020, Joe Biden actually won the popular vote by more than 4 points. And how about this? DeSantis who sort of pitched himself as the electable version of Trump to Republicans, fares worse against Biden than Trump does. We also tested Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador. She actually leads Joe Biden by 5 in our poll.
This is notable because she had such a strong showing in the first primary debate. Could that be the reason we're seeing this bump, Steve?
So two of the major polls, CNN and Washington Post, where Nikki Haley is beating, the only one beating Joe Biden outside of the margin of error, and also happened to be tied in this poll. I think in the CNN poll, Trump is up by 1, and in this poll, they're 46-46. So let's listen.
Possible. Let's put a pin in this one, though, because one thing our poll found, she's not nearly as well known as Trump and DeSantis.
Right.
So
she's not going to win
she's not going to
win
attacks,
the nomination.
We'll
so
see.
this doesn't matter.
Obviously, the fact that the president is struggling this much against every Republican we put him up against raises the question. Where is that coming from? The most obvious answer is just this: is simple question of job approval. Barely 40% approve of Joe Biden's performance.
And we have to note 56%. That's the highest disapproval rating for President Biden since he took office.
Yeah, the highest the way that now they're able to talk about him ever since the David Ignatius article, and I think it dropped in, was that the Washington Post? Forget. I think it was the Washington Post. Ever since then, they've been allowed to more talk about him more openly, even with critiques, as you see. I'm just curious because it's getting close, like weeks away. I think 3 weeks or so away for where they're going to replace him. So I'm wondering if there's going to be enough pressure in this way where these poll numbers are just devastating, because the one we're going to cover tomorrow, 10 points. 10 points.
That's significant.
Yeah, so let's take a look at what's driving that too here. In one big area, no surprise, it is the economy. Look at this contrast. This is April of 21, months after Biden took office. Nearly half the country was satisfied with where the economy was then. Now, barely 1 in 4 Americans satisfied with the
20 points
economy.
there.
There's also this. We found an enthusiasm gap between the two parties. We asked folks on a scale of 1 to 10, how enthusiastic are you about the presidential election? And you can see Republican to Democrat, there is a gap right there. Where's the lag for Democrats? We found a couple
Look
places.
where the lag is.
Non-white voters, you could see significantly less enthusiastic than white voters. And then how about this age gap? The youngest group.
Let's look at that there. White voters enthusiasm 73%. Black voters 20% less than that at 53%. Latino voters at 51%. And then when you go down to age, look at 65 plus and look at the main, not the main, but one of the main demographics, 18 to 34. Look where that's at.
Group of voters who Democrats.
I'm going to rewind it.
See
so
Republican to Democrat, there is a gap right there. Where's the lag for Democrats? We found a couple places. Non-white voters, you can see significantly less enthusiastic than white voters. And then how about this age gap? The youngest group of voters who Democrats have been trying to get excited and motivated, nearly 50 point gap there.
So really an uphill battle to try to make sure voters don't stay home if you're Democrats.
Yeah, that's it. And the problem for Democrats, too, the lack of enthusiasm about the election, there's clearly a lack of enthusiasm about the president himself, because we asked primary voters on the Democratic side, do you want options next year besides Biden? 59% said yes, they do. This is not
a democracy, and the Democrats is a private organization. And they saying, fuck what the voters want. We doing what the hell we want to do. So if they're going to insert somebody, that's definitely going to be Gavin Newsom.
A normal number for an incumbent. We asked the same question a year before Donald Trump sought re-election of Republicans. Only 37% wanted more choices then.
So you see the contrast? Do you want a different challenger? Do you want a different challenger to do you want challenger to incumbent? Do you want a different person representing your party? 59% are saying yes to Joe Biden. When the same question was asked about Donald Trump, only 37%. That's an enthusiasm. That shows more enthusiasm problems between the two candidates.
very high number.
Yeah, this is like the inverse of each other, these two numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it raises the question, too, what else concerns Democrats? And I think this gets to sort of the elephant in the room here. Biden's age and fitness. I mean, look at this contrast. We have talked so much about Donald Trump, the indictments, the legal woes. They are clearly a major or moderate concern to the majority of Americans. But Biden's age and fitness for office,
his
almost
age
3
supersedes
out of 4
even
in
the
our poll.
indictments.
This is Democrats, Republicans, Independents say it's a.
So they want things like Trump's indictment to be the most important thing, and they simply are not. So Trump's 91 indictments gets less a lower approval number than than Biden's age. So people are more concerned about Biden's age than Trump's indictment. That's devastating to the Biden administration.
The major or moderate
re-election
concern
camp
for them. How about Trump? He's only a few years younger than Biden. A full 27-point gap right there.
A full 27-point gap, and mainstream media refuses to address this. When they're only 3 years apart, how can this be? Because people are literally answering their question based off what they are seeing in the person. They're not just talking about a number, not knowing who the person is. The person is obviously reflecting on Joe Biden. Yeah, I've seen him falling down. He's messing up. He clearly is walking slow. His mind, he looks clearly vacant eyes a lot of times versus Donald Trump, and I see him acting a certain way. So clearly the number is reflecting what people are seeing, even though you're only trying to narrowly describe this as age. Let's continue.
This is looming as a major problem for the president, too.
It's notable because his strategy is to try to laugh off concerns about his age. We'll have to see
keep
if they
laughing it
revisit that
off.
strategy.
Keep laughing it off.
Fascinating stuff. Steve Kornacki, thank you so much.
Yeah, and there's another segment in here where the panel talks about it. I'm going to save that for tomorrow's show. It has reached just about the little over the 2-hour mark. I think I'm going to get out of here and see all of you tomorrow. This is one of the clips we're going to cover, but it's too short, so I won't use that. Let me just see what else is going on here. Oh yeah, this is the poll that we'll be covering tomorrow. Nick and CJ show tomorrow. So make sure you tune in for tomorrow's show, because this is one of the things we will be covering. Let me see here. Do I have any leads on any of the other stories that I can kind of give you heads up on? Let me see if I have any leads. Did I save any? I think I might have the whole show prepared. No, I don't. So, all right. So then that is the only one. All right. So let's see if I can find an outro video to take us home. Oh, wow. Some more Clinton shit. More Clinton shit. Let's go with this. So this actually might end up being a segment tomorrow. Let's see what she says. Let me see what the caption is. This is Nico House. Clinton literally just accused Putin of doing literally everything that she and the U.S. has been guilty of. I don't think I've seen anyone engage in this much projection in under 3 minutes. And that sells me on this being a good closeout clip to use. Let's see if there's any other super chats we need to read before we get out of here. I don't see any super chats, any new ones at least. And then let's check comments. Yeah, that poll is hilarious. Let's check comments, see if there's anything else. Thank you. And anything else? All right, I'm just tossing up comments. Hopefully, I get your comment in. Anything that's cohesive without a lot of anything. Anyway, all right, that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and take off. Make sure you tune in. Join our Substack to get notifications when we go live tomorrow. It's probably gonna be 1:30 p.m. or 2 p.m. maybe, something in that realm. 2 p.m. Eastern, that is. We're talking Eastern. All right. So thank you everybody for joining me this Sunday afternoon. Hit that like button on your way out. Enjoy this video. I'm watching it for the first time too, but this is Hillary Clinton, so it can't be good. Let's listen.
Vladimir Putin has obviously your friend and mine.
Yes, indeed.
He has intervened in our election in the past.
Right.
It's not something, as you experienced firsthand, it's not something we talk about a lot. Do you fear that that is something that could be happening for 2024? And do you think we should be talking about it more?
Well, I think we should be talking about it more because I don't think, despite all of the, deniers, there's any doubt that he interfered in our election or that he has interfered in many ways in the internal affairs of other countries, funding political parties, funding, political candidates, buying off, government officials in different places. So that is his opus, his opus operandi, in the sense that he hates democracy. He particularly hates the West, and he especially hates us. And he has determined that he can do two things simultaneously. He can try to continue to damage and divide us internally, and he's quite good at it. And sadly, he has a lot of apologists and enablers in our own country, people who either don't see the danger or dismiss it out of hand, or maybe agree with some of the positions he's taken on certain things, including his barbaric invasion of Ukraine. And so dividing us and then trying to seize territory in such a brutal way to try to expand his reach, to try to restore the Russian Empire, if not the former Soviet Union, that is who he is. I said that for years. Part of the reason he worked so hard against me is because he didn't think that he wanted me in the White House. So we are where we are. And part of the challenge is to continue to explain to the American public that, the kind of leader Putin is, this authoritarian dictator who literally kills his opposition, kills journalists, poisons people who disagree with him, invades other country, interferes with our election. That is part of the alternative we have to reject in this election. We have to reject authoritarianism. We have to reject a kind of creeping fascism almost of people who are really ready to turn over their thinking, their votes to want to be dictators, and we can't allow that to proceed. So I think it's fair to say that you have a tough job because you have to talk about what's happening in the news, but you also have to keep people's eyes on what's right behind the horizon. And I fear that the Russians have proved themselves to be quite adept at interfering, and if he has a chance, he'll do it again.
You can't break the back of the corporate duopoly. You can't break the back of the big money two-party system without money in the movement. This campaign is a moment in a movement. And so I hope and pray that you are willing to provide some financial support, especially as we approach the end of this quarter. Let's make history together. You can't break the back of the corporate duopoly. You can't break the back of the big money two-party system without money in the movement. This campaign is a moment in a movement. And so I hope and pray that you are willing to provide some financial support, especially as we approach the end of this quarter. Let's make history together.